Hey everyone, I'm Josh and I'm the Gatherings Director here at the River Church. And thanks for checking out one of our messages today. We would love to get connected with you and your family. And one easy way to do that is to text River Connect, one word, to 97,000. Or you can visit our website at theriverchurch.cc to learn more about us and some upcoming events. If you'd like to give to the River Church today, you can text the amount you want to give to 84321, or you can visit our website and click the Give tab at the top of the page. Thanks again for joining us today, and we hope you enjoy today's message.
Well, we continue our series in the Proverbs. We've been meeting a lot of people along the way. And as we talk this morning, I'd like us to remember three of the people we've met along the way, because we are meeting somebody new, but this person relates to these other three people. Number one is the simple person. The person that is simple, that will just kind of started, doesn't know any better. It's a simple person. Then you've got the person of folly and the way of folly, and you've got the path of wisdom and lady wisdom. And so we're going to be talking about that today. And so we need to remember these because we are meeting someone that we've all met and possibly have even been close to. And so today on our journey, we're actually meeting the adulterous woman. And by inference, man. Okay? As we begin this morning, I want to make it very clear. We are going to be talking about the gift of sex and sexual immorality in the message that I'm about to speak. All right? And I would say that as we dive in, I will be speaking at minimum a junior high level, if not a high school level. So I'm anticipating that all kids 5th grade and under are in River Kids this morning, not in here today, all right? You are more than welcome to have your kids in here today, but you need to know that I am going to be talking about some things that are going to be at a different level, all right? So you're more than welcome to have them go into River Kids this morning, but that is up to you. And so I just want to make sure you know that there's no surprises, all right? I want to make sure that's the case. I also want to say that as we begin today, that this is a topic that can bring up hurt, it can bring up pain, and it can even bring up conviction. Sex and shame are linked. And I want you to know this morning that as I speak, my desire is to preach the word. We've had this talk amongst our location pastors this week. We've been really praying for each other because we want to treat it well and we want to speak well on this topic. And I want you to know that there is no judgment in my heart toward any of you this morning toward past mistakes. And if past mistakes are dragged up, that's not my heart. There's also some things that I talk about that there may be a twinge or you have questions about, or you're actually living in sin right now and you don't like completely what you hear. I want you to know the bottom line is you're loved no matter where you are. You are loved no matter where you are, no matter what you hear this morning. And what I'm speaking on that today is because God wants what's best for you. And you may think, why are we talking about this topic today? Why in church? Well, happy Father's Day, right? Like, a great way to celebrate this occasion, right? But the first reason why we're talking about this is because God's word talks about sex and sexual immorality quite a bit. God has a lot to say about this gift that he's given to us. And if God talks about it in his word, we have to talk about it in church. The second reason is the culture is talking about it all the time. The culture is talking about it all the time. It's not something that was spoken of openly in the 50s and 60s, for sure. It may have been an undercurrent. It wasn't really until the sexual revolution of the 1970s that it started to become a bigger topic of discussion. But it was also spoken about in Bible times. But when we look at our culture is running off the rails morally. Running off the rails. I mean, we look in the news and we hear that there are drag parties happening for children. Open in libraries, public libraries. LGBTQ curriculum in our schools to tell our kids what the culture believes is true. Pornography is considered pretty normal in our society today. It's estimated that there are 200,000 porn addicts in America. 200,000. It's probably much higher. 40 million Americans regularly visit porn sites. 35% of all internet downloads are related to pornography. 35%. And 1/3 of those users, lest you think it's just a male issue, 1/3 of those users are women. And marriage statistics are down. 50% of adults, only 50% of adults actually live with a spouse. That number has decreased in the past 10 years. The divorce rate is 50% in America in 2022. So half of all marriages end in divorce. And that number is actually at the lowest level it's been in probably about 50 years. But when you look a little deeper into the statistics, fewer people are getting married now. Fewer people are getting married, and cohabitation is up. Living with someone before you get married is up. Premarital sex is the norm. The norm, according to the CDC, in 2015 was each person had an average of 4 to 6 sexual partners in their lifetime. That's the average. That was 7 years ago. Who knows where it's at now? But why don't we talk about sex in the church? I mean, once a student graduates from youth ministry, sex is largely taboo in the church. We don't talk about it. It's as though we all see sex as dirty. I'd even say that for some of us today, the amount of times I've just said sex in the last 30 seconds has just made you very uncomfortable, right? But I think it stems from the fact that when it comes to our faith, with our relationship with God, so many of us have been taught that sex is dirty. Because all we've been taught is we're not to speak of it. I mean, I spent 20 years in youth ministry, and we had purity weekends that we talk about sex and what God had to say about it. However, so often what we talked about was the don'ts. Don't, because you're not married yet, and we want to save ourselves from marriage. And that's the message of Scripture, is that sex is supposed to be saved for one man, one woman, in marriage only. Because that's God's blessing to us, and there's so many reasons for that. We always talked about don't do those things. We didn't speak as much about the positives and the do's. But the problem with that is, as I just stated, the world is talking about it. And if we don't talk about what God has to say about sex, we won't know what the truth is. We simply won't know what the truth is. And those that are simple will be easily led down the path of folly. So at the beginning of today, I would like to just say briefly to those of you that are parents of children, if you are not having continual conversations with your children about sex and sexual morality from what God has to say, they will learn it from the culture. They will learn it from their schools, and they will discuss it with their friends. And the enemy is going to take every opportunity he can to shape and form your children. And he is good at doing that. You have to be having these talks. And I want to say, if there's anybody that has specific questions about how or when to have these talks, if you're looking for resources on how to begin these talks, please get in touch with me or Jeannie. Jeannie, raise your hand. Jeannie's my wife. Please let us know. Over the years, we've been able to find resources, spending so much time in youth ministry and being parents ourselves. They've been very helpful for us, and we'd love to be a resource for you. Not that we have it all figured out by any means, but maybe we can share some of those resources with you so you can begin those conversations. Let me tell you, it's never too late. If you haven't started, start now, because the culture is shaping your children. Okay? And our sexual identity matters. It's part of how God made each and every one of us in his image, as male and female. And as our culture blurs those lines and tries to call it moral, we are living in Romans chapter 1, calling evil good and calling good evil. It is what is happening in our culture today. We must talk about this. We must talk about this. I mean, but the reality too is that romance actually started from God. The relationship of marriage is from God and can't be redefined by culture. Marriage belongs to God. He's the one who instituted it, nobody else. But then God passionately came to earth and became one of us to die in our place. That's why it's called Jesus' Passion, his Passion Week, restoring our relationship to God by dying for us. You know, all the good romance movies has somebody dying for the other person or doing something huge for the other person. Everybody goes, oh, that's so sweet. You know, I mean, but Jesus came and he died for us. In fact, God speaks of his people with marriage language all over Scripture. The church, us, we are his bride. We're his bride. The commentator in Proverbs, The Wisdom of the Work, says this: marriage is a divine creation, pointing to something beyond us. A man and woman falling in love, committing themselves with lifelong vows of faithfulness, uniting sexually, living life together till death do us part. It is all pointing to the mega romance of Christ and the church in love forever. A man and a woman in love display the ultimate story of the Son of God, coming down to win his heart with great suffering, a bride from the wrong side of town. God created the universe for the purpose of telling that love story. More than any other reason, that is why our sexuality matters, whether married or single. Just being a man is a gospel privilege. Just being a woman is a gospel privilege. What we are is about the gospel. That's why we need to learn gospel sexuality. And I want to say that we're going to be talking about the adulterous woman, and the reality is we're going to be talking about marriage and what that looks like. But for those of you that are single, I want you to know that your sexuality matters too, and how you protect it, how you guard your heart before God leads you to the one that you may marry someday. There may be some of us in this room that have the gift of singleness. I believe that is a gift from God, to have the gift of singleness. Paul talks about the fact that somebody who marries, it's good that they're married. But if you're single and you are okay with staying single, it's good to stay single because you can focus on serving the Lord. A person who's married has various responsibilities with their kids, their spouse, all this other stuff. But somebody who's single can focus on the Lord. That's a gift if you've never been married. For those of you that have lost loved ones or been through divorce, this matters to you too, because there may be temptations beyond that. There may be temptations that we're talking about this morning that you need to think about, because our sexuality matters no matter where we are. So today we're looking at Proverbs at the adulterous woman. So again, I want to say that the writer of Proverbs is speaking as a dad speaking to his son. So ladies, we're not saying that women are the problem. That's not what the writer of Proverbs is trying to say either. Ultimately, we're listening in to a father speaking to his son, so he's talking about the adulterous woman. But by inference, we can also say the adulterous man, because there's plenty of men that are just as smooth talking that as any woman is too, all right? We both bear responsibility in this, all right? We are both part of the problem because we're sinners and we're selfish, all right? So I want to say that up front. And James 1:14-15 says this, "But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it is conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death." See, we've all had our desires. They drag us away, and they entice us. My friends, sex is a fire. It's a fire. And fire, within boundaries, can be used for awesome things. Fire, when not used within those boundaries, utterly destroys. So, enough intro. Let's dig in. Proverbs chapter 7. Let's turn to Proverbs chapter 7. That's where we will kind of land between Proverbs chapter 5 and Proverbs chapter 7. There's a big 3-chapter section here that the writer of Proverbs really digs into adultery and sexual sin. So, as we look at verses 1-5, and I do want to say these verses will not be on the screen because I want us to look at it. So get your Bibles out, get your phones out, whatever you have for your Bibles. Proverbs chapter 7 is where we're going to be, okay? I'm going to read verses 1-5 of chapter 7 first. It says this, "My son, keep my words and treasure up my commandments with you. Keep my commandments and live. Keep my teaching as the apple of your eye. Bind them on your fingers and write them on the tablet of your heart. Say to wisdom, you are my sister, and call insight your intimate friend. To keep you from the forbidden woman, from the adulteress with her smooth words." See, the writer is speaking to his son, and he's saying, become related to wisdom so that you'll be able to withstand these temptations that are going to come your way. The writer is having the talk with his son about what temptation will do and how it can sneak up on you. We've all had the talk at one point or another for the most part, right? And the first time dad or mom bring it up, you're like, no, la, 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 la. You don't really want to hear it, right? That's kind of how it goes. At least that's happened in our household. But that's what we're hearing here. And then in verse 6 on, the father speaks of what he saw happen to the simple person. So let's hear that. Verse 6, "For at the window of my house I have looked out through my lattice, and I have seen among the simple. I have perceived among the youths a young man lacking sense, passing along the street or near her corner, taking the road to her house." It's interesting that he takes the road to her house. He knows what the road is. He took the road on purpose. In the twilight, in the evening, at the time of night and darkness. Yeah. And behold, the woman meets him, dressed as a prostitute, wily of heart. She is loud and wayward. Her feet do not stay at home. Now in the street, now in the market, and at every corner she lies in wait. Temptation is all around you, is what this stat is saying. She seizes him and kisses him, and with bold face she says to him, I had to offer sacrifices, and today I have paid my vows. So now I have come out to meet you, to seek you eagerly, and I have found you. I have spread my couch with coverings, covered linens from Egyptian linen. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let us take our fill of love till morning. Let us delight ourselves with love. For my husband is not at home. He has gone on a long journey. He took a bag of money with him. At full moon, he will come home. Verse 21, with much seductive speech, she persuades him. With her smooth talk, she compels him. All at once he follows her, as an ox goes to the slaughter, or as a stag is caught fast till an arrow pierces its liver. As a bird rushes into a snare, he does not know that it will cost him his life. And now, O sons, listen to me and be attentive to the words of my mouth. Let not your heart turn aside to her ways. Do not stray into her paths. For many a victim she has laid low, and all her slain are a mighty throng. Her house is the way to Sheol, going down to the chambers of death. So from verse 6 on, the Father speaks of what he saw happen to this young man. See, temptations come in two forms here. Number one, they come in the form of words. They come in the form of words. You see all these words from verse 16 to 20, from verse 10 to 20 or 6 to 20. She's talking and all these words are coming out of her mouth and they're very seductive. And that's where temptation begins for every single one of us. It's the first draw, any kind of communication. The coworker starts to laugh at your jokes. An old fling messages you on Facebook, and you respond, and you start having a conversation. You're becoming good friends with a person at the gym, and they understand you better than your spouse does. You're talking about things in your relationship before marriage that really you aren't ready for morally yet. You put yourself in situations where temptation is going to be huge rather than not walking down that street like this young man did. Oh, I wonder what's down here. He knows exactly what the road is. How many times do we put ourselves in situations, especially when we're dating, that we know we shouldn't be in? But we put ourselves there anyway. I can handle it. Yeah. Sex is a fire. But you know what? It's not just about words like that. It also comes from our culture. Our culture tells you, wait to get married. To go out, experiment with all kinds of people to see who'd like to marry. Now, the Bible talks culturally about young marriage. I personally am a proponent of young marriage, mainly because this. Again, I'm not saying you had to get married at 20. Gene and I got married at 20. It worked great. But why do we think that people can live? Wait till you're 30, 35, get married. So we're telling people, wait and go live for yourself. Because the whole point is, go do things you want to do. Be what? Selfish. Learn how to live for yourself. Then about 30, 35, get married. And learn how to live for somebody else? After you've lived for the last 15 years, 15, 17 years, only selfishly? That's hard. Not saying it can't happen, but that's what our culture's telling us. It's all based on selfishness. It's not based on unity and living for somebody else. And that's not saying you have to get married. I'm not saying everybody has to get married. But the reality is that's what our culture's trying to sell us. You know, I actually had a parent in youth ministry, in my years of youth ministry, tell their child that they should live with their partner and have premarital sex, fornicate, to see if they're compatible for marriage before they actually get married. This was somebody in the church that would call themselves a Jesus follower. My friends, I don't know how we've lost this in the church. Living together and sex before marriage goes directly against what God has to say in his word. And I just want to make sure that's clear this morning. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. But living together is dangerous. And we'll get into it. But I want to make sure that we know what God's word has to say. See, the woman here in Proverbs 7 talks this young man up in order to seduce him. And he eats those words like honey. He is hook, line, and sinker. I mean, she even says down here, what does she say? She says, in verse 14, I even had to offer sacrifices. And today I've paid my vows. Hey, I went to church Sunday. I prayed. You know what? It's Saturday night. Let's take our fill all night because tomorrow morning we could just ask for forgiveness. That's what she's saying here. Tomorrow morning we can just ask for forgiveness in church. See, God's going to forgive us because we're already clean. It's not a big deal. We won't get caught. And those are the things that get into our minds when we have this temptation of all of the things we're talking about. And then there's looks. Because he looked at her and how she was dressed, and attraction draws you in. This is where the mind comes into play. See, the simple begin to understand. The simple person begins to entertain thoughts about other people. This includes pornography, TV shows, movies, anything that draws us away from God's intent of God's gift for sex for us. Anything that draws us away. We have to be careful of what we watch. I would encourage you to know what's in a movie before you go into the movie theater. There's plenty of websites to find that out. Know what you're watching on the screen. It affects us. See, the simple person has to make a choice in the middle of temptation, but because they haven't chosen yet. The path of folly or the path of wisdom. And then we see in chapter 7, verses 21 and 23, what happens to the young man when he gives into temptation. It says all at once he follows her as an ox goes to the slaughter. He's an ox going to the slaughterhouse. Why? Because the wages of sin is what? It's death. The wages of sin is death. And he wants to say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But that just isn't the case. Because in Proverbs 7:26 it says, for many a victim she has laid low. All her slain are a mighty throng. Turn back a couple pages to Proverbs chapter 5. And this is the warning of the father with adultery and overall sexual sin. Verses 1 to 6. My son, be attentive to my wisdom, incline your ear to my understanding, that you may keep discretion, and your lips may guard knowledge. For the lips of a forbidden woman drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil. But in the end she is as bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps follow the path of Sheol. She does not ponder the path of life. Her ways wander, and she does not know it. He starts off telling his son, look, you're going to be tempted. Temptation will come. And it's going to look like you should go into that temptation because it's going to look good and it's going to feel right. And it will at first, because honey is really sweet at first. Honey is really good at first. But this honey turns to wormwood, and it leads to the place of the dead. And then verses 7 to 14 are the consequences of this sin. And now, O sons, listen to me and do not depart from the words of my mouth. Keep your way far from her and do not go near the door of her house, lest you give your honor to others and your years to the merciless. Lest strangers take their fill of your strength and your labors go to the house of a foreigner. And at the end of your life, you groan when your flesh and body are consumed, and you say, how I hated discipline and how my heart despised reproof. I didn't listen to the voice of my teachers or incline my ear to my instructors. I am at the brink of utter ruin in the assembled congregation. See, right off the bat, the father says in verses 7 to 8, stay far away from sexual sin. Stay far away from it. Don't even go there. Don't even get close. In fact, Paul told Timothy in 2 Timothy 2:22, so flee youthful passions and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace, along with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart. In the NIV, that says, flee youthful lusts. Get out. Don't stay there. When temptation comes, run. But that's not what we do typically when sexual temptation comes. I can handle this. I can stay in the moment. I can have this conversation. I can connect with this person on Facebook. I can have lunch repeatedly with the same person of the opposite gender at work over and over and over and over again. I can flirt a little bit. It's not a big deal. I can have a little bit of sex before marriage. God will forgive me. It's not a big deal. See, this is a life and death issue. Why do you think it's so rampant in our culture? The Bible tells us that other sins are outside the body, but sexual sin is inside the body. All of us have a sexual identity that God has placed on us as male or female. Why do we think that the enemy is attacking this? It's part of the image of God in us. It's attacking the very authority of God in our culture. See, the feet of the adulterous woman or man goes down to death, to the place of the dead. The path of folly leads to destruction. And this is when we give in to temptation. Remember, sex is a fire. When it's put in a constraint, it's a great tool for warmth and can even give help in creation of things, fire can. But when fire is left to itself, it destroys everything. Sexual immorality is a big deal, and don't downplay it in your life. I just had a thought. Just because you might be 60 or over, don't check out this morning. I had a conversation with an 80-year-old pastor one time when I was like 19 years old as an intern. His wife had passed years earlier, and all us young guys we had a conversation about remaining pure in the ministry. And we went up to this guy and we talked to him, and we're like, so, when does it get easier? When does the temptation get easier? And this 80-year-old pastor looks at it and goes, boys, it doesn't get any easier. And all of us went, no! We're like, we're trying to figure this out. Trying to figure out how to stay pure before God. Remember what pride does, right, my friends? Take heed when you think you stand, lest you fall. Okay? So nobody check out this morning. Sexual immorality is a big deal. Because listen to this. Another commentator in the book of Proverbs says this: be careful how you treat God, my friends. You may say to yourself, I can sin against God, and then, of course, I can repent and go back and find God whenever I want him. Try it. And you will sometimes find that not only can you not find God, but that you do not even want to. You will be aware of a terrible hardness in your heart, and you can do nothing about it. And suddenly you realize that it is God punishing you in order to reveal your sinfulness and your vileness to you. And there is only one thing to do. You turn back to him and you say, oh God, do not go on dealing with me judicially, even though I deserve it. Soften my heart, melt me. I cannot do it myself. You cast yourself utterly upon his mercy and upon his compassion. But I also want to say here that I think there's probably a lot of people that don't know what God has to say about sex in the Bible. Because we either haven't heard it, or we have chosen not to hear it, or we've heard it from somebody else's opinion, not really looked at it ourselves. There's a passage of scripture that I have every premarital couple read in our first session. Because so many couples that are getting married do not know what God has to say about sex and how important it is to do it right so that God can bless your relationship. And this is the passage, 1 Thessalonians 4, verses 1 to 8. I want you to hear this. It'll be on the screen. Finally then, brothers, we ask and urge you in the Lord Jesus that as you receive from us how you ought to walk and to please God, just as you are doing, that you do so more and more. So keep doing what you're doing. For you know that what instructions we gave you through the Lord Jesus. For this is the will of God, your sanctification. Sanctification is becoming more like God, becoming more holy. Okay? That you abstain from sexual immorality. That each one of you know how to control his own body in holiness and honor, not in the passion of lust, like the Gentiles who do not know God. that no one transgress and wrong his brother in this matter, because the Lord is an avenger in all these things. As we told you beforehand and solemnly warned you, for God has not called us for impurity, but in holiness. Therefore, whoever disregards this disregards not man, but God, who gives his Holy Spirit to you. Now let me tell you, the word for sexual immorality in that verse is the word porneia, which is where we get the word pornography from. But in the Greek, it covers all sexual immorality, including fornication, which is sex before marriage, outside the bounds of marriage, adultery, homosexuality, and more. That is what we are to refrain from. Because the Lord is the avenger of these things. Jesus tells us to actually gouge out our eye if it causes us to sin in Matthew 5:29. Get rid of the computer, get rid of the phone, get rid of the whatever. If pornography is something you struggle with, get rid of it, gouge it out. It's that important. And we're to flee sexual immorality. 1 Corinthians 6:18 says, flee from sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits is outside the body, but the sexually immoral person sins against his own body. See, our culture is going to tell you that living together is the first step before marriage. And it's taken hold in so many relationships. At the very minimum, you are playing with fire. You're playing with fire if you're going to make that choice. Remember, fire in its proper use is awesome. Fire outside its boundaries destroys. Song of Solomon 8:4 says this, I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, that you do not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. The entire book of Song of Solomon is about love in marriage, and it is about the physical expression of love in marriage in the Bible. A whole book of the Bible is dedicated to this topic. And what she is saying here, do not awaken love until it pleases. In other words, you are meant to enjoy this gift that God has given you, but don't awaken it until you can do so while honoring your God. And according to his word, it is a gift when it is enjoyed within the bounds of marriage. Why? Because God loves you. He loves you. He wants what's best for you. Back to Proverbs 5. These are the things that the writer says that will hurt us. He actually says that lest you give your honor to others. Sexual sin is going to take your honor and give it to others. For a moment of pleasure, the path of folly will take what you have. You will lose the honor of being a wife or a mom, a husband or a father. You'll waste your time and resources. Paul Koptak, a writer for the proverb, a commentator, says, when you take what is not yours, you can end up losing what is. When you take what is not yours, you can end up losing what is. See, if you committed adultery, this writer of the proverb says you may lose your peace to the merciless because of the retribution you may fear. I'll tell you what, you sleep with another man's wife, you better look out. Because the wronged husband's probably coming for you. That happens. It absolutely happens. Someone else may end up kissing your spouse and tucking your kids into bed. You lose what you have because of a moment of folly. Your laborers go to the house of a stranger. What does that look like today? Alimony and child support. At the end of your life, you're going to speak of your folly because you've lost your relationships, and your whole family knows that grandpa was the one that cheated on grandma. Sexual sin kills. It kills. Not only that, you can lose your health in a myriad of ways. We don't have to get into the health section of this sin. See, sexual sin leads a person away from God, and it drags us to hell. This is not an unforgivable sin, but a person that lives in sexual sin and has no desire to follow God in this area, it doesn't indicate that person knows Jesus. My friends, you go back to Galatians chapter 5, and you look at the fruit of the flesh and the fruit of the Spirit. Lust and sexual sin is part of the fruit of the flesh. What is the fruit of your life? That's how you know whether or not you're following the Lord or not. I'm not saying we're not going to struggle. I'm saying if you are a person that is just living in sexual sin and you don't care what God has to say, it doesn't indicate that you know Jesus as your Lord and Savior. But there's always hope. There's always hope. I don't want to come up here and say that there's no hope for this, but we have to know what the consequences are. The world's going to try to sell you that everything's okay, but the only one that's going to tell us the truth about this is God. This is crazy. I found this article. Several years ago, a businessman was sent out of town by his company. The first night in the other city, he phoned for a call girl. She came to his hotel room and knocked on the door. He opened the door, and there was his daughter. He immediately began having chest pains with an apparent heart attack. Sexual folly carries consequences. I had to look this up because it was in a commentary. 2012 in Hong Kong, I believe it was. The path of folly, my friends, leads to destruction. But there is also a path of wisdom. There's a path of wisdom. And we find it in Proverbs 5:15-23 where it says this: drink water from your own cistern, flowing water from your own well. Should your springs be scattered abroad, streams of water in the streets? Let them be for yourself alone and not for strangers with you. Let your fountain be blessed and rejoice in the wife of your youth, a lovely deer, a graceful doe. Let her breasts fill you at all times with delight. Be intoxicated always in her love. Why should you be intoxicated, my son, with a forbidden woman and embrace the bosom of an adulteress? For a man's ways are before the eyes of the Lord, and he ponders all of his paths. The iniquities of the wicked ensnare him, and he is held fast in the cords of his sin. He dies for lack of discipline, and because of great folly, he's led astray. See, the father is teaching to his son of you to view this gift of a spouse as a gift from God. View marriage as a gift from God. See, the idea of water here is used to indicate a raging thirst. A raging thirst. Sexual desire is a raging fire. And that may vary for all of us, but that's a reality for us, is it's a raging fire. And God has given us a gift in this. Far be it from us to only talk about the negative side of it. My friends, this is a gift from God. It is truly a gift from God. I often tell the premarital couples that I have, and I tell them, it's not that, I don't want to be weird about this, but it's not like when you are partaking in this gift as a married couple that God goes, ew, I can't, it's also not like God's a creeper or anything. But the reality of it is that God is rejoicing of the fact that his children are enjoying the gift that he has given to them of the other person. And a unity of spirit, a unity of emotion, and a unity physically. This is a gift from God. It is a positive thing to unify a married couple, to produce children that will, the Bible says the parents are blessed with a quiver full of children. This is a gift. So singles, I want to say to you, first of all, as we talk about this, and we get into the good side of this, wait for God's leading in your life. Wait. Let me tell you, I have never, ever had somebody come to me and say, I wish I hadn't waited. But I've had plenty of people come to me and say, I regret not waiting. Delight yourself in him, and he will give you the desires of your heart. In fact, he will make your desires his desires. And don't awaken love until it can be fulfilled. Honor the person you are dating more than taking advantage of them before marriage. And honor your future spouse, because it may not be the person which you're currently dating. And we cannot ever think that sex is a dirty thing. It's not. It's that gift that God has given us for a depth of relationship. God is telling us within marriage in this passage, are you ready for it? Go for it. Within marriage, enjoy it. It's his gift to us in marriage. In fact, he says, be intoxicated with the love of your spouse. What does it look like to be intoxicated? I've seen YouTube videos. We've probably seen people that are drunk. They are overcome. The control of themselves is now given over to that alcohol or whatever it is. Be intoxicated in the love of your spouse. They are a gift to you, or to you from God. And as you age, this is the cool thing. As you age, you can grow in that intoxication. And your husband or wife, if you continue in God's way in your marriage, no matter how old they get, they are still the husband or the wife of their youth, of your youth. Why? Because you will still view them that way. I mean, is that not a gift? Is that not a gift? Man. Be crazy in love together. It's one of the reasons why Gina and I are so passionate about helping people in marriage. We think marriage is cool. We think it's awesome. We think it's a gift from God. But so much destruction can happen when we go away from the path that God has for us. The path of wisdom and sexual morality is one woman, one man in the commitment of marriage for life. That is God's prescription for marriage. Now, we hear what God's prescription is, and I would say that there is many of us here that have not struggled with this in one way or another, that we've not fallen in one way or another. In fact, there's people here, I'm sure, that are thinking, well, I still can overcome this on my own. I can step back from that conversation on Facebook. The flirting at work isn't that big of a deal. I'm in control. Stop looking at porn whenever you want to. Living together, sex before marriage, God understands. Besides, we plan on getting married anyway. I have to see if we're compatible. It's easy to buy the lies that the adulterous woman or the man is selling, the lies that the culture is selling. I just want to read a few passages of scripture, and I want you to hear it directly from there. Proverbs 6:27 and 28. Can a man carry fire next to his chest and his clothes not be burned? Or can one walk on hot coals and his feet not be scorched? Proverbs 6:32. He who commits adultery lacks sense. He who does it destroys himself. 1 Corinthians 6:9-10 says, or do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived. Neither the sexually immoral, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor men who practice homosexuality, nor thieves, nor the greedy, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor swindlers will inherit the kingdom of God. Hebrews 13:4, let marriage be held in honor among all, and let the marriage bed be undefiled, for God will judge the sexually immoral and the adulterous. And then it goes back to the question we've been saying this whole time. Ephesians 5:15, look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise. The question is not, is this right or wrong? The question is this the wise decision? Is this the wise thing to do? Because it could still be right, kind of, but is it going to lead us toward the wrong choice? Again, the reality is that the majority of us in the room are not immune from sexual sin. In fact, we've probably fallen in this area. We've experienced failure. Is there hope? Is there a way back? Is there something you can do? Jesus stands ready to forgive and transform you completely as you come humbly. Jesus will transform you and forgive you. Return to Jesus. Get in the Word. Confess where you failed. Go after wisdom. He's calling your name. He wants what's best for you. He wants you to be in heaven with him one day. Ask for help. Reach out. You know, I want to say here to anyone here today, there is nothing that you could have said or done ever that would cause myself, Jeannie, the leaders of the church, I believe people here at the church, that they would look at you differently. Because this is what happens when we know we've done something wrong and we keep living in it. Proverbs 32:3-5. For when I kept silent, my bones wasted away through all my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me. My strength was dried up as by the heat of the summer. Selah. I acknowledged my sin to you, and I did not cover my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the iniquity of my sin. Selah. My friends, you can be forgiven. You can be forgiven. This is the gospel. There's always hope. There's always a way out, because Jesus always gives a way out. Always. If you don't know Jesus today, he wants to change you. My friends, you can be free from sexual sin. You can be free from it. You really can. You don't have to suffer in shame and secrecy. But remember, you can disagree with what is said this morning, but I want to remind you what Paul said in 1 Thessalonians. If you disagree with this sexual morality from God's word, you're not disagreeing with me or with your parents or with people around you. You're not disagreeing with us. You're disagreeing with God. And like we talked about last week, if we become a friend of the world, we become an enemy of God. It's why Jesus died on the cross for us. Because we are all sinners. I also don't want to give the impression that sexual sin is worse than any other sin. Every single sin separates us from God. Every single one of us needs a Savior. And it's through Jesus Christ. He gives us hope. He gives us help. And he gives us a way out. You don't have to suffer in shame and secrecy. If you want to have God's blessing on your relationship or eventual marriage, go to Jesus. Confess what you need to confess. I want to tell anybody here this morning, if you are struggling with pornography, please reach out. It is not a scarlet letter. If we're going to help each other actually overcome sin, we have to stop treating things as though they are the worst thing we've ever had or the worst thing that could ever be done. And it's not just guys, there are women that struggle with pornography too. If you are struggling, there's a way out. There's a way out. You don't have to suffer in secrecy. You don't have to suffer in shame. I pray God's Spirit gives you the courage to ask for help. Because you can't do it alone. We got to do it together, and it's possible. God has given us a gift in sex. And we have an enemy that is distorting it every single day. We have to know what the truth is so that God can bring us his blessing in our relationships and our lives, and we can follow Jesus every single day. But we have to come to him humbly. Because remember what we said last week. God opposes the proud, and he gives grace to the humble. In James chapter 4, it says, humble yourself before the Lord, and he will lift you up. Remember, when we humble ourselves before him, he does the heavy lifting. Come to him humbly, confess your sin, and he will lift you up. I guarantee it. As we close this morning again, I just want to say, if you want prayer, man, I would be honored to pray with you. Don't suffer in shame and secrecy alone. I really believe this issue of sexual immorality is literally killing people in the church. It's keeping them away from Jesus because we haven't talked about it. I'll tell you right now, I feel a tension in the room even because I believe the enemy doesn't want us to hear this. There is hope in Jesus Christ. There is no shame in Jesus Christ. He doesn't want to take away your joy or your fun or whatever it is. He wants to give you real joy, real life. This thing we think we have as life on our own apart from Jesus is nothing compared to what he has to offer every single one of us, including this area of sex. My prayer is that you hear God's heart. You don't hear a pastor raving about different things. I pray you hear God's heart for you. That he loves you. He wants to change you from the inside out. He is a perfect father, and he wants awesome things for you. If you're struggling, please reach out. I'm available after the gathering. There's people at guest services who would love to pray with you too. There is hope and transformation if we come to Jesus humbly. Let's pray. Father, you know what we've talked about today. You know what we've brought out from your word that's there, that, Lord, you speak to so plainly. this gift that you've given us, that you intended for good, for relationships, for depth of relationship, for a picture of the gospel of Jesus Christ even, and marriage. God, I pray for those here this morning that are single. Some that maybe want to be married and haven't gotten married yet, and they can hear a message like this and think it's not for them, and just a reminder that they're not married. Lord, I pray that that's not what they hear. I pray that they would hear your heart for their future. That God, in the middle of all the struggle and the temptation and the messages that the world is trying to sell, God, I pray they'd hear your truth above all the lies. Now they would rely upon you for what you have for each one. God, for those that are struggling with what they're looking at on the internet, God, I pray that there would be conviction, but I pray that there would be hope, that they can change, that they can give it over to you, and that they can overcome. God, I pray that they would ask for help. God, for those that have been giving into some temptation and maybe Facebook messaging and flirting, God, I pray that there'd be conviction and that there'd be a stopping there. And Lord, I pray for those of us that are married that, God, we would take heed of the Proverbs and find our fulfillment in this way in our spouses. That, God, we would treat marriage as the gift that it is and treat sex as the gift that it is. God, point our hearts toward you in this way. Help us to see the wise path and help us to have the courage to take it. Lord, we love you and we thank you for your gift, for your forgiveness. We thank you for your mercy. We thank you for your gifts. We love you, God. In Jesus' name we pray.